which is that since we're in this auditorium that's big enough to hold several hundred people, and there's only about 20 of you, why don't those of you who are back there in the cheap seats come down here so that we can see you and interact with you, and we don't even need to bother with these, oh, we're taping this, aren't we? So,
Yes.
Well, it'll be nice to be able to have you close enough that we feel like we're communicating as humans.
See everybody mic check? Not yet.
Thank you. Didn't mean to embarrass anybody by making you move. And you could have protested.
I think I have enough that you.
Yeah, I think you're good. All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for making the trek down, for supporting the Lyric Opera and the Chicago Voices initiative. So this is on protest songs, but before we get started, let's go ahead and introduce the panel.
I'm Dave Hoekstra, Chicago writer and radio host, WGN on weekends.
I'm Ric Wilson, Chicago performer, artist, and a prison abolitionist.
I'm Paul Graves. I'm the executive director at Old Town School of Folk Music.
I'm Cynthia Johnson Woodfolk. I'm a creative writing professor here at Columbia College. I'm also a student activist, and I work for Changing Worlds.
And I'm Martez Rucker, a vocalist, pianist, composer, and arranger, faculty here at Columbia College, and also very active in community outreach. So since we're here about protest songs, what's the purpose of a protest song?
Well, I guess I'll go ahead and I'll jump in. On the gospel side, can I say it like that? Mm-hmm. On the gospel side, the purpose of a protest song was to motivate those who were protesting, to bring back to mind to them the faith that they have, to give them a spiritual backbone, can I say, spiritual backbone, to push them forward into what they were going to face, the challenges, the struggles, sometimes the hatred. And yeah, I'll leave a little bit for everyone else.
Well, protest songs, like any piece of music, it's meant to move a human being's heart. So in the case of protest music, you're trying to galvanize people into some sort of social action around whatever the issue happens to be, whether it's civil rights or nuclear disarmament or gender discrimination, whatever the issue happens to be. You're trying to move your audience to actually do something about it.
Action.
Yeah, I think when I think about protest songs, I think like about so like I love history, so I think like about the creation of protest songs in America, and I think about like, you know, the songs that folks would sing like on the slave plantations, and the songs that they would sing to get them through their day and to survive. So when I think of protest songs, I think that protest songs are a song that sort of pushes folks to keep surviving through like the times that they're in. And not necessarily, I don't know if that's the action they do. There's different types of protest songs, but I think, you know, all protest songs, the goal is to like push folks to like keep surviving through their oppression.
And I think that I heard Curtis Mayfield from the back when we were in there, and I think that we talked about this on the radio show last Saturday. I think there's a combination of a protest song of understanding and love, and then there's a combination of also to agitate and to inspire, and maybe I don't know if the best protest song is somewhere in between, or if there is such a thing as a best protest song, but I mean, to me, Curtis Mayfield's just, his stuff is really, really, when it comes to understanding and stuff, it's really important.
I mean, I kind of bounce off of what you all have said, because I believe the purpose of the protest song is to, one, acknowledge there's a problem. I mean, if there's no problem, there's no reason to protest. So you have to bring that to the forefront and then to galvanize or to unify all underneath that underlying cause. And it's the unity that makes it effective, because if a protest song is too divisive or if it agitates too much, then you're fighting against what the goal really is. And that's to bring an awareness and a responsibility to do something, rather than, you know what, I'm not going to do anything, there isn't one. You can push people further back into the closeted way of thinking if you don't bring them out in a unifying way. Now, you spoke to the multiple types of protest songs, Rick. Would you care to elaborate on the different types?
Well, yeah, I think there's like, so like some people wouldn't say it, but I think like Kendrick Lamar got this song, has a song called like I, and he talks about how he basically like loves himself. I feel like that's like and that in itself is like a protest song. But then there's songs that like Beyonce has on her like Lemonade project that was called Freedom. This has Kendrick Lamar in it. I feel like that's more of like a, you know what I mean, I want this sort of song. And then there's like songs like Donald Trump by YG, who like this very like I want to say something song. Like I don't really want to do anything, but like I'm going to be the soundtrack to like the protest, you know. Like so I feel like there's songs that tell people to do something, and there's songs that just like want to make a statement.
Okay, so that would be, you know, protest songs and then songs of protest. I mean, if we think of songs of protest as being the ones that would be the soundtrack to the movement, and then protest songs as being the ones sung at the movement.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, under that umbrella, that also is a pretty wide variety. You got the union songs, you've got the freedom movement songs, you've got the suffrage songs, and they all kind of have their own different messages and their different ways of delivering them, as do the songs of protest, which can be, as you said, Kendrick Lamar's I, which is, you know, more personal, or Kendrick Lamar's How Much Does a Dollar Cost? You know, where it's more so pointing out different things. But if we were to take it literally as in the protest song, does the delivery of the protest song differ depending on the protest?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely, because I think there's like, you know, there's like, well, also like protesting has like changed like throughout our times, you know what I mean? So like what King and them were singing at their protest songs are not gonna be the songs that like me and my friends are singing now at protests that we're organizing, you know what I mean? Like I just seen this video, the inauguration protest like in Chicago, and this dude had like a speaker and he had like a juke like beat going on, and people were like rapping to the juke beat, like, you know what I mean, at the protest. So I think it definitely differs on like the protest.
And I'm going to bounce off of him and agree with that. Because of the changing face in protesting today, such as what I do, which is more so in the classroom, looking at student rights and what they're fighting for. These songs are spraying out of inspiration. Not that any other song is not spraying out of inspiration, but they are inspired in the moment. And such as a movement that happened in New York City just very, very recently, where they stood right outside in Times Square, directly in front of the police station. So they're in front of the police station is directly in back of them, and they're beating on their chest to create the music. And then they're singing basically one or two words. That's all they're doing while everyone is beating on their chest. And then they stop singing and they let this thing continue, which is the music. That was a changing time. That was an inspiration that was spontaneous right there in the moment. And now this thing has been streamed live. And now this thing has taken off, and you have a following right behind that. This is now the movement of a new protest song. It's going to change according to each generation. They're going to take it to a different level. They're going to add some words to it. We've already seen this happen in the 50s and 60s when we had We Shall Overcome, and then out of inspiration came We Are Not Afraid. That was not a line in the song. It was something that came from that moment, and it sparked a new movement. There was a new reaction. So this was an action that sparked a new reaction to this, and now it is inclusive to the song. So I agree with him. There's going to be a change that occurs because there's a change in the people, and hopefully there's a change in the hearts and a change in the times that bring about, having to respond to that change.
And also, if it follows what the current political landscape is, there's a feeling that politics has become of who you are, and maybe not so much of what you believe. You know what I mean? And I think protest music can follow in that.
I agree.
I'd make a distinction between songs that are personal to the performer and are really meant as performances versus songs that are participatory and are meant for the masses. A song like Bob Dylan's "A Hard Rain's Gonna Fall" has 35 verses that are all long and complicated, and probably Bob Dylan can't even remember all the lyrics to that song. I don't know anybody who can sing all of them. That's a personal statement of Bob Dylan's, and it's sort of delivered to his audience, and maybe it inspires them. That's very different from the kind of songs that were sung on the picket lines during the labor wars, which, it would be a simple chorus. It would be, "You can't scare me, I'm sticking to the Union, I'm sticking to the Union, I'm sticking to the Union. Well, you can't scare me, I'm sticking to the Union, I'm sticking to the Union until the day I die." And there's only like, about 9 or 10 words there in the whole chorus. Anybody can join in. Now, there's verses that get more complicated that Woody Guthrie wrote to that song. But everybody in the room could jump in on the chorus. And then you get into the civil rights movement, where so much of the music came out of the black church, and many of those songs are simple, repetitive. Whether you've ever heard the song before in your life or not, you can jump right in on it. Ain't nobody gonna turn me around. That's basically the whole song.
Well, seeing as you brought up that distinction between personal statements and then songs for participation, I find that in the jazz idiom, a lot of those are personal statements that have somewhat become the face of their anguish, their pain. I mean, you take Old Jim Crow by Nina Simone, that's a very personal statement of how she felt about the situation. You take Four Women, that was a personal statement of her evaluation of the portrayal of African American women in society from slavery to that day. And then you take even bigger works like Duke Ellington's Black, Brown, and Beige, or Wynton Marsalis's From the Plantation to the Penitentiary, or Blood on the Fields. Those are all very personal statements that have somewhat been academialized, if I could use that word. It's more so for thinking, more so for pondering, rather than for the audience participation. I mean, I doubt anyone's going to head to a protest singing Strange Fruit, but the lyric content of Strange Fruit caused thinking. It caused a reaction that then led to the participatory songs of the protests.
So it's almost like it causes the spark of the protest.
Yes.
That's real. I would say like me, like, the mic's on now. I would say like me, like researching Gil Scott-Heron, because he's definitely way before my time. He definitely sparked my protest. So I see what you mean in that sense.
Yeah, you mean even linearly, Home is Where the Hatred Is, being the spark for Kanye West's My Way Home, which then came with Common on top of that, which then sparked Black America.
Right.
So just the lineage itself alludes to what you were saying about the spark. Well, since we're talking about the role of the protest song, how has it changed from then to now? Because now, if you look at protests, they're not as front and center. Has it all become just the soundtrack for the movement, or is there still a place for it in today's protests?
Okay, so then I say that goes back to exactly what he's saying. Are we talking personal protests, or are we talking about mass protests? Are we talking about peaceful protests and silent protests in which there's still a music to the silence, or are we talking about a very verbal protests. I think there needs to be some distinction when we're talking about this change in protests and how protests are actually happening today, because there's a lot of protesting going on. You have a 1 million man march and 1 million women march and 1,000 people doing things, but at the same exact time, there's a difference in this music. So what type of protests are we exactly talking about?
Well,
based on my experience, it is on now. We were talking about this on Friday night of the inauguration. I marched by Trump Tower, and there was no music. There was a brass band, but it was very personal. If there was music, it was a personal thing. There was one brass band. There was no gathered singing or anything like that. I think you had a similar experience on Saturday.
Yeah, I was down at the Women's March, which I thought was a spectacularly energetic and beautiful, loving event that inspired everybody who was there. But it astonished me that there was no singing. There was some chants, this is what democracy looks like, but it was really lacking in the kind of music that I associate with the political protests and demonstrations that I experienced over the course of my life, civil rights, anti-war, environmental, where music was really central to it. And it sort of makes me scratch my head and say, well, do we need a whole new generation of protest songwriters to come on and create the music that is going to become a tool of these demonstrations? I heard Fiona Apple's little Tiny Hands song, which it's not really a song. It's a chant, and that's okay. It's fine, but the ingredients that you need to sort of mobilize a mass of people, there's got to be a simple melody, some simple and straightforward and easy to apprehend words, and there's got to be some juice behind it that makes the people who are singing it feel as though it's empowering them to keep on going. It's an interesting thing. I was in Brazil a number of years ago, and you listen to pop music on the Brazilian radio, and there's lots and lots of singers that have big choirs backing them up on the choruses of their songs. And the whole choir is singing in unison. And I got talking to some Brazilian musicians there and said, why don't they harmonize this music? Is that me? Sorry about that. I've ruined the broadcast. Well, I'll just do this. I said, why don't they harmonize on these songs? Certainly they're musically so sophisticated, all those lush Brazilian harmonies. Why are the choirs all singing in unison? And they said, well, these are all samba songs that are meant to be performed in parades with tens of thousands of people. And if you throw in all those harmonies, the tens of thousands of people are never going to pick up that melody. They've got to hear it from 2 blocks away and be able to pick it up. And so they've got this huge tradition of choral singing by very large crowds with all this fantastic samba pop music. I think that that's the kind of hook that a good usable protest song needs to have, or a participatory protest song. I'm stepping away from all those performance ones, and there's some awfully good performance protest songs too.
And I agree, when we're talking about a call and response, it serves for 2 different reasons here. You're talking about a call, which we know in most gospel songs you have the call, and then you have the response where everybody responds back. And it's the same thing when you're talking about moving to action. There's a call to action, and then there's the response that we look for to come right back. So that very simple tune sets that right back to mind for the people that you are calling to action and the people who have been called to action. And then everybody can, even if they don't want to participate, this tune follows them home. It's like a 30-second commercial. When you hear that jingle, that thing grabs every little kid, and every little kid will start to sing that thing, whether they want it to or not. It has been embedded because they heard this over and over and over again. And so even if people don't want to, let's say, participate in a protest, when they're walking past and they're hearing this very simple call and response, somewhere in their mind, they begin to hear that thing ringing with them. And so secretly, you have implanted this message, and they have become a part of what they may not have wanted to become a part of. So you've left something behind for them to trace and trail because it was simplified just enough that they could remember it.
I mean, it's good that you brought up the fact that it's simple, that it's repetitive, because in our generation of social media, 140 characters or less, there's not really time to get across a huge, diverse message. But something as simple as all that we're saying is give peace a chance, being the message of that time, that could still go on. So if we could figure it out, or if we could try to pinpoint, where did we go from those types of songs, from the call and response, from the songs of the civil rights and the women's suffrage movements to just chants? And how has that affected participatory protest songs across time?
I don't know the answer to that for sure, but I would guess that a part of it is that popular music in general has become so much more about the beat than it has been about the melody. And the beat, you need it, it's got to be there. But in terms of something that you can take out into the street and mobilize a bunch of people with, well, maybe you'll keep them marching, but it doesn't motivate in the same way that a song does.
Right. I mean, by the time if you just join a protest, if it started on Michigan and Congress, and by the time it gets down to Michigan and Roosevelt, if you just walk in, some of the times you can't even understand the chant. You just hear sound and you hear a rhythm, but you don't quite know what's going on. And I think that's what we're losing with the absence of the participatory song, because that line being repeated in a clear way, even if I just join, okay, give peace a chance. I got that. But if all I hear is, I don't understand it. And in turn, I believe the protest sort of suffers from that, because the message that you really want to get out isn't clear enough through just a 4-word chant if it's not grabbable, if it doesn't catch them.
But the protest suffers before that. It suffers way before the music hits. And it suffers because there's I'm just going to say it, the elephant is in the room. There has to be an education when it comes to protesting. Mm-hmm. It's not something that you just go and jump into just because you think you have a stance to take. There are some things to stop and consider. There's a movement now, and it's not really a movement, but it is a movement. It's about protest and performance, how they come together. But before you can perform, I'm going to use this word, you must understand what protesting truly is. And we've lost the history of protest. How many people who stand in a protest actually know what the history was? If you consider what a march was, and you say a march on Selma, if you consider what a march on Selma was, how the people looked, what the people were marching for, you can see the unity just visually. You saw that unity. You could feel that unity spiritually. You saw everybody coming together for one purpose. Well, now the face has changed. They all look different. Everyone's marching with different clothing on, different factions of what they're marching for. If you stop to ask, what is the purpose? You'll find one will give you one response, another will give you another response, and another will give you another response. And now you can understand why the lyrics and the music is all so discombobulated that all you have is a beat and a rhythm. Because that's all they have, is a beat and a rhythm as to kind of sort of why we're marching and fighting, but not a solid understanding of what we are doing. So that history needs to be there. There needs to be an education as to what protesting really is and what protesting has stood for and what protesting can stand for and what protesting will stand for. And then that will start to help to dictate this music of what we were looking for or what we were used to, and the messages that go right back out to the people so that they can grab onto. You are absolutely right. If I got a lot of, oh, I'm a duper duper, and we're doing it. We're not doing anything but creating another song to be played on the radio and not a message to be heard by the people. We need the education.
Well, there's the nature of the protests themselves. If you were marching in Selma, you were undertaking a life-endangering act. I mean, there was
Exactly.
people being killed. During the anti-war demonstrations, the police would come in. There was Kent State. I mean, students were being shot for being at a demonstration.
Yes.
On Saturday at the Women's March, it was such a glorious feeling out there in that crowd, but it would have felt really different if there had been a bunch of National Guardsmen standing on Michigan Avenue opening up with their AK-47s. The whole nature of the event turns completely, and who knows? I mean, I heard some on the news a couple of days ago, some congressman was responding to the demonstrations taking place at airports and says, well, maybe the country really needs some more Kent States. So maybe that's where we're headed.
I think, oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I think a couple of things. What time is this? One, I think a lot of protesting. I think we need to. There needs to be a difference between the word protesting, marching, and demonstration, and then direct action. I think people need to know that those are 4 different phrases. I think like a lot of protesting has become like very commercial, and there aren't really organizers actually organizing protests. People are just sort of coming together. So let's protest for this, but we don't really have an end goal. You know what I mean? Like I didn't know. I mean, I wasn't at the Women's March, but I didn't know like what was the goal for that like march. Like I didn't know like what was their? Did they have demands? What was the demonstration for? What did they want to get out of the march? Or what was going to be like afterwards? What was going to be the next stepping stones of like the next stepping stones of organizing for whoever were the organizers for that march? When I used to organize with BYP 100, the Black Youth Project 100 in Chicago, every protest or demonstration we did had a purpose, and we let the news know every time they asked us, and we were very organized, and we knew exactly what we were doing and how we were doing it and why we were doing it, and we got some small victories to show for that. So I think people just need to protest for a purpose and not. I don't know. I just feel like protest is very very commercial now, and it's not very like direct and like purposeful.
Well, yeah, a lot of these are, people are learning about them through social media and not the human touch, you know? And I think gathering some people together face to face as opposed to, you know, what you're talking about, seeing that stuff. But I want to go back to, so how do you educate? How do you go back to educating people how to protest? What's the process?
Well, somewhat of what he said, you have to have that goal. You have to, number one, and this is something that we have been doing. We've been sitting down and meeting just in a collective bunch, talking about different issues of what we're noticing, and especially with me being in the classroom, is being more so about student advocation, I should say it that way. We have educators that sit down, we have students that sit down, and we discuss what the problem really is and what the goal is that we set in mind. And we talk about everybody being on the same exact page. I can't move in a different direction than you move. So it has to be a unified thought, unified purpose, and we talk about what that unity actually looks like, what it sounds like, how it breathes and how it moves. And then we talk about the history of protesting. We show several films, we talk about several different movements, we look at several different countries all at one time so that they can see that there's a actual common thread that runs through every single one of these protests that we are actually looking at. And that common thread is that all of the people are moving together for one. The goal is clear. It is clear, and we are prepared. Families are prepared. It is established. Is this going to be let's say, a movement that may become violent? That's something that we have to educate on. If this does become violent, there are some cautions and some methods that have to be in place for us all before we can move into this thing. And we make them aware of that. This can happen. This can happen. So you don't want anyone, and then we don't allow anyone, and I'm saying this in a very clear way so that I'm being crystal so that you can understand. It's someone who walks, I'm going to say, off of the street and want to join that demonstration. Well, there may be someone to stop them to say, you're not very clear on what could happen here. So we don't want any innocents, I'm going to say it like that, to be affected by what is going on. And they're not clear of what this is. So you may get a pamphlet. Say, here, take a pamphlet, and take some time to, read it. Don't mind if you are off to the side, but if anything happens here and you're arrested, you don't know what you were arrested for. You don't know what exactly happened here. So we want you to be very clear of what can happen. It's a protection for us and a protection for you. So, there has to be, these are the things that we do to try to put this, into place, letting you know. Now, I'm not an advocate for violence. I want that to be clearly understood. What I do is not for violence. It is more so for understanding and the rights of people. But if there may come an opportunity of violence, we have to make you aware of that. We make you aware of the ifs, and we make you aware of the wills. The if and the will happens. I think that has that education. And this is a constant thing. This is not something that happens, sporadically right before we're going to do something. This is something that is continual. It's happening every single day. Every single day. There's a coming together of minds. There's also a coming together of minds of, were we successful in our goal? Yes. Were we as successful as we wanted to be in our goal? No. Then we have to look back at that and see why. Why? Where did we go wrong? And how do we repair this? And we're constantly talking to every single person. How do you feel? How are you today? We have to keep each other up spiritually, mentally, and physically. So we're working together so that everybody, let's use the word, is healed and not just out there. We need you morally and spiritually together so that we can move together. If I'm feeling bad and the rest of the group is feeling good, then we already have a circle that's broken. We need the circle to be unbroken. And so we work it together like that. So it's an everyday, ongoing thing. That's the education.
So to tie in what you just said about there being a togetherness, and what Rick, you said about there being an organized protest with a clear goal and clearly defined objectives, that goes back to the original cause of the participatory protest song. It brought everybody into that exact state of mind so that everybody knew what was going on. Where are you going to be? Everybody was in the room. Yes, the "We Are Not Afraid" verse of "We Shall Overcome" was not planned, but "We Shall Overcome" was. That was something that was set, that was going to be used as the voice of their movement. And before they all walked into that situation, they knew what was going on and where it was. Now, for those who did not know, who were watching from the outside, "We Shall Overcome" became the spark, as we talked about earlier, to get them involved in the organization of the movement. Now, with today's social media generation, where everything is captured in a 15-second clip and thrown on Facebook, my thoughts, 15 seconds on Facebook. Here's a picture of me at a protest on Instagram. That ties into the commercialization of the protest and the dumbing down, so to speak, of the original intent of such. So, as artists, how do we bring it back to what the original purpose of the protest song was? How do we get it back to this in a situation where everybody's worldwide looking, but they're not here? How can we bring it back to getting them all on the same page?
That's a really interesting question. If you think about the labor movement, the unions had very specific goals. They were trying to shut down the Ford Motor Plant until they got a new contract. Everybody knew what they were there for. During the Civil Rights Movement, so many people went through all the SNCC nonviolent training, and you were not expected to come and participate unless you knew how you were going to respond if some Ku Klux Klansman came over and started beating you up. But in what we're seeing now, sort of these flash mob mass social movements, how can that sort of cohesion come together? You know, the March to Selma was about some very specific goals. The Women's March was about a dozen diffuse goals, and partly it was about just showing solidarity against the ridiculous scene that everybody's witnessing in Washington. That's really hard to articulate and to bring into focus, and a handful of good songs would be really useful to do that.
I'm an advocate of something like the old Operation Breadbasket concerts and forums that were held at the International Amphitheater in the 60s and stuff, and that's where the Staple Singers came up through, and Gene Barge was the band leader, and Ben Branch was involved with that, and Cannonball Adderley played at those things, and just even have this like a weekly performance series at the Old Town School, just protest music every single Saturday morning, like the breadbasket thing. Just continue to put that in front of the public in a live setting, place not only where they could hear it, but they could also gather and share ideas and thoughts and stuff. I think to have it out in the public, like they did in the late 60s with the breadbasket movement. I mean, where where do you go hear protest music if you want to,
You know.
Yeah.
Right.
Is there a regular series though? Is there?
Well, we don't have a series of protest music, but there's a pretty large body of the 60s, 70s pop, folk, anti-war, civil rights songs that are a big part of the canon that just gets recycled. And maybe that's a piece of it too. In the 60s, there was a lot of protest music that was on AM radio, and everybody was listening to it all the time. And maybe they would arrive at the demonstration, and all of a sudden everybody around them is going, "War, what is it good for?" And they didn't even know that they knew this protest song. It's just that they heard it 100 times while they were driving around in their car. It was in the air.
Well, since you brought up the radio and the accessibility of songs with these messages, I believe that the fact that that is also gone. You said it's in the air. A lot of what's on our radio stations now doesn't deal with those themes. I don't know if it's because of the mandates from radio stations that we play this list of 100 songs and that's all we have. I don't know if it's the demand of the public that all we want to hear about is something different than that. But is there a way for us to get back on the airwaves and such, or is it even feasible to do so? Because truthfully, most of the news that I get doesn't come from radio or from TV. It comes from social media. And that's where people are all the time. So in this situation, is it even feasible for us to use the vehicle of a protest song to get things done the way that we really want them to be done?
I don't know, maybe technology has thwarted the capacity of any song to penetrate a mass of people. Back in the days of AM radio, the same station would be playing Yellow Submarine by the Beatles and Cloud 9 by the Temptations. You'd hear the same radio station playing a wide variety of music. Now everything's gotten segmented, and so you're on your iPod and you're listening to what you particularly want to hear, not necessarily what is being purveyed to a broader public. And there's nothing that is reaching that broader public.
Wow.
How to tackle that? Maybe the songs just have to happen spontaneously on the spot.
Okay.
Yeah, or if you really wanted to get protest music out to people, you can pay for a Twitter ad or Instagram ad, because you see all those all the time if you're on Twitter and Instagram for people who use Twitter and Instagram in here. I don't know. But I think it's really interesting, the phrase that you use when you said "in the air," because it's not in the air anymore. You're like, cause like, so like I will be like at like at an action that we're organizing, and then like I'll leave, and like the atmosphere would just be totally different, and you're back into like a different atmosphere, and like I feel like the atmosphere followed you guys like everywhere in the '60s.
It's true.
So I have no idea how that feels like, or what that feels like.
It's definitely more fragmented now. Yeah.
If you recognize it.
Yeah.
If you even recognize it. When you consider, like you said, in the 50s and the 60s, this music was continuously played. And even though it was mixed with other things, there was still a open airwave playing of it. So that, you heard, and like you said, you danced to it. War, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing. He says, say it again. And everybody danced to it. Everybody danced to it. Everybody listened to There's a Train A-Coming. You better get on board. Everybody listened to Curtis Mayfield. It was the in thing to do. Now there's so many different types of music that if you did hear a protest song, would you really recognize it? Would you be able to stop and assess those words and say, oh, wait a minute, somebody's standing up for something? If I said India Arie did a protest song, would you believe me? And then if I said, I am not my hair, then you would go, oh, yeah, You right there, you would go, yeah, I sang that, but then it wouldn't really resonate to you because there wasn't, I'm gonna say, anything that continuously followed it, that kept this idea of protest in your mind. What followed after that might have been, Super Soak That or anything else that came right after that, and so the message was lost. And then you grabbed onto something else and said, hey, Talib Kweli did say something. There's another 4 women out there. But then something else happens and that message is easily sifted away. So I think we're so inundated with so many different things that I would love if we went back to, let's say, the old days where the music flowed together.
Well, the other thing was, like, in Chicago, like, you had WVON, where you had people like Herb Kent, Purvis, they were community leaders, and they would tell people where to go and how to organize. They'd go out in the streets and stuff, and they had that role, and people listened to that and followed step and stuff. I don't know if radio has that right now,
There's another little piece to this story is there were a lot of sort of stealth protest songs. They were songs that were gentle and beautiful and pretty, and people would listen to Where Have All the Flowers Gone or A Change Is Gonna Come, and they would love it because it's a gorgeous piece of music, and sort of not even be aware that they're cherishing this song, which is really a pretty profound protest song. Or then there's ones that are so stealthy that people don't even recognize them. I mean, Donald Trump was playing Bruce Springsteen's Born in the USA at his rallies, and he cannot have ever listened to the lyrics of that song.
Yeah, there's the whole thing about being subtle. I mean, you mentioned Springsteen. He was in Australia last week, and after Trump hung up on the Australian Prime Minister, he started his show with the Orlons' 1962 song, you don't hang up, you can't hang up. And so humor, that's why I'm a big fan of calypso and protest music, the subtleness, a lot can be done that way too. Yeah.
I feel like that I think it's just not popular for artists to be political nowadays, though. I don't know when that changed or whatnot, but like I know that like I like do music. This my existence in itself is resistance, but like I do music that is like resistance music, or like come together music, protest music, whatever you want to call it. And I know a lot of people tell me that like I need to like do like a hit song or like do like a song, you know what I mean, like a song that's not political, so that I can reach a wider amount of people. So I don't know if the music is just not political or are people just not political anymore. in a sense.
I think I'm interested, but there's a lot, I think, happening organically, and it needs to, like, there's this label Impossible Colors and stuff, and they're doing like cassettes now, protest songs and stuff. But I'm just learning about that, and how do you bring that up to a larger audience and stuff? How do you get out of a niche thing and stuff?
Right.
How does it cross over into a big thing? That's a Chicago label, and they just put out a 13-song cassette of protest songs and stuff, but how does that get to the general public?
Right.
Yeah.
Is it major record label money?
Yeah, right.
To the radio?
I mean, even with major record labels, I go with what you alluded to. It's not popular. And therefore, I mean, if it's not popular, it's not on the radio. If it's not on the radio, no one's listening. If the tree falls in the forest and no one's around to hear it, then it does make a sound, but that sound is only there for those who hear it. I mean, and if you look at major artists, I mean, Jay-Z. Millions, Tidal, all of that. But he made a song about Hurricane Katrina entitled Minority Report that was very critical of what was going on at the time. However, it was on the album Kingdom Come. What were the singles from that? The hit songs? Show Me What You Got, Beach Chair. Those are the ones that were played. Minority Report, which happened, it was very topical. It was at the time Katrina hit, but it wasn't used. So there is some truth to that, to where it's not popular to be the socially conscious rapper or the political person. Nowadays, we live in a situation, a society of partisanship. As you said, it's not what you believe, it's who you are. So if you make a song that's critical of a certain situation, instead of it being, okay, I see your point, but, or I see your point, here's what I think about it, a chance for discussion. It's immediate either acceptance or rejection. And the origins of protest music, the protest songs of the eras where it was in the air, where it followed you, is that there was a unity there. Even for those, some who did not quite agree, it wasn't to the point where it's a complete divide. Okay, all you're saying is give peace a chance. I can get behind that. Now, how you outlined in the rest of these verses, how you want to give peace a chance, maybe not, but I will give peace a chance. Nowadays, it's, I say this, no, or yes. So that fragmentization has caused a rift in the people. And while it's up to us as artists to heal that divide, it's such a massive divide that it's going to take more than just us making the music. It's going to take the record companies playing the music, the radio producers pushing the music, the public accepting the music, and then moving in a direction to unify. So while it's such a massive undertaking, we kind of have to. We have to take it.
There's a big Hollywood music mogul, guy named Bob Lefsetz, who's been hotshot in the record industry for 40, 50 years. He's got a blog that I subscribe to, and it's fortuitous that this morning his blog was about protest songs and why we don't have enough of them. And he wrote some rules for what we need for protest songs. And he says, anthems are necessary. How many times can we sing "We Shall Overcome" and "This Land Is Your Land"? There is a huge vacuum waiting to be filled. Melody. Beats rule, but they don't translate very well. It can't be taught to elementary school kids, and I'm not humming it in my head. Truth, not anti. It's not about putting Trump down, but speaking for the disadvantaged, and the left wing will not regain power until it connects with the disadvantaged. Singable chorus, which comes early in the song. Short verses, which express both frustration and speak to the plight of the working person. Don't worry about offending. Just by speaking your truth, you're going to piss off somebody. Don't let that hold you back. Great art has historically made people uncomfortable. You're doing it for society, not for yourself. Narcissism is passé. You're providing a service.
Was he listening in?
That's good.
That last one was like perfect.
Right. And I think that's a great place for us to wrap up our discussion and see if there's anything from the audience. Any questions? Yes, ma'am. I think they're going to come around with a mic for you, so.
I've been listening to you, and what I understand protest, and not just a discipline, but an organization. And it takes me back to, two things came up. When I was watching the movie Selma, there's an incredible scene where King decides that he will not go ahead with the march, with the first march. And he stops and he walks back, and everybody follows him. It's not, there's an authority figure, and there's discipline and obedience. And then I was thinking, David was talking to me yesterday about the march, the Women's March in New York, where Madonna was singing. She was in Washington, I'm sorry, but she was in Washington, and she clearly was not the right person to express the feelings of the crowd. She expressed them in a way that offended too many people. How do we now, because clearly there's enough sentiment, protest sentiment in this country, how do we channel that in a disciplined way so that we aim towards what we need rather than we fragment in all of these different ways, and that our marches are really effective rather than just something to cover and use?
Well, I would say, first of all, remove the commercialism away from that. To choose a singer that, to choose a singer that didn't, I'm really trying to choose these words correctly, right? I know what's popular and what's not, but I'm gonna have to just go straight from, I'm gonna have to shoot it straight from the hip. To choose a singer that did not deliver that in the way that it should have been delivered, that should have been considered before she was even chosen. And this is the thing about that discipline in the organization again. You can't just choose someone because they're popular and that they will be the attention grabber for the audience. The attention grabber for the audience should be the goal set in mind. So to not have that established within the group, that's something that needs to be considered right away. Right away we need to consider that. So it goes back to the discipline of what you are after. Maybe if they would have looked at someone, let's say, not so popular, someone within the group who could have sang that song, or someone who believed truly in the cause, that would have changed the face, quite possibly, of that march. Quite possibly of that march. And it goes back to what we were saying. It is about the delivery. It is about the delivery. This is where we're talking about the times are changing. The minds have to change, and we have to embody that. And that's the only way you can deliver it and give it right back out to the people. So it's to consider a bit more in that organization of what we're actually doing.
I mean, I also want to tag along with what what was his last name? Bob Lefton. He said it's about truth, not anti. When we look at truth, there's no disputing truth. Truth is truth. I mean, you have to.
Not alternative facts.
Right, not alternative facts. Truth. I mean, so when you have a movement that's based on truth and everybody is understanding of that truth, then that has a unifying goal right there, the truth. So once you take that truth and you move that truth forward and you pick, as she said, an appropriate person to deliver that truth to those who may understand and those who may not understand. Once again, the truth is truth. Now, if I'm offending you, if I offend you, not the truth, if the truth is the truth, but I offend you, I've defeated the entire cause of my movement. But having that truth as the unifier will get everything moving in the right direction. Rather than I'm against this, I'm for peace. I'm sorry, we have one there.
So I'm involved in a couple various activist spaces, and with spaces, I'm thinking about the space I'm in right now, which is a higher education institution. And so I have to think about what, not necessarily Columbia, but what higher education institutions are accountable for, what the what responsibility is if we are supposedly preparing a generation of global citizens. What, if you could look, I don't know how many years ahead of me, with me, then teaching like you say, the discipline or the education and the history, which is already there. But if there was a practical method, if you want to narrow it down to a class on protest music, composing it, learning the context, because I have to think about the trajectory of jazz too. We have, it's academia now. It's over analytical, and so we've lost that human touch that you're talking about, and I see that too in multiple different fashions. So what's the practical application of teaching these kinds of things in the classroom, the stigma that could occur, and also things like in jazz that have occurred? Is it now just accessible to the privileged? Could it become exclusionary? How do we take what we learn in the classroom and apply it to community outreach, and that kind of trajectory?
Okay. I'll speak on the jazz side. Jazz has become very academic. And there's a luminary, Wynton Marsalis. When it comes to education, Wynton has achieved all there is to achieve. When it comes to writing books on theory of jazz and the application of certain aspects of the music to a performance, Wynton has it covered. However, Wynton realizes that in order to really push jazz forward and to get out a message of protest, as in from the prison to the penitentiary, he has to dive back to what catches people. And the very last track on his album is called Where Y'all At? And in it, he has a speaker asking all you activists, all you protesters that were marching in the 50s and the 60s, where are you at now that times need help? And it has a very simple hook, just where y'all at? That's the whole chorus. Where y'all at? Very simple, which is against everything academic jazz is. Academic jazz is, here's this scale, here's this chord change, you must do X, Y, and Z. But this is a very simple cry. So using all of his knowledge, he created something that can be used to push it forward. Now, if we do the same thing jazz-wise, and we get rid of the word jazz, if we do the same thing music-wise, we create something that's simple, that's catchy, that has truth in it, that's not anti-something. He's just asking, we have problems. I'm not saying I'm against this, but we have problems. I'm for solving them. Where are you at? Come help me. And I reach out and I touch you two. Hey, let's get together. Let's do a project. Let's get it moving. And then you reach out and you grab 4 more. Hey, let's go. Yes, we're jazz musicians, but hey, we're musicians now. We're people. Let's go. Bring it in. And we do the same thing around. Now, jazz is out the window, but we're still using it. Gospel's out the window, but we're still using it. Hey, Rick, let's do a project together. R&B, rap, jazz, gospel, blues, folk, who cares? But if we consider it jazz only, we've got problems because it's so in a box. But if we consider music being universal, a universal language, it'll push it forward. And we won't have to worry about here. Just truth plus good music equals progress.
And I will piggyback off of Martez just for a quick second, because we both work into the same classrooms together. And when it comes to that pedagogy that you're talking about, how do we teach it? Is it inclusive? Is it exclusive? How does it come together? One of the things that we do, as he said, we erase that box that always winds up around the music, and especially with me being a student advocate for rights. One of the things that we talk about in that classroom is opening up for all people, whatever may be bothering them. We have to have that floor. And so I introduce a lot of the writing techniques to the students in order to get that song out of them, in order to get that sense of, as we say, that call and response, that sense of repetition, so that it does touch the audience. And one of the things that we'll do is take something that's very simple to children, which is their game tunes, simple jump rope tune, to bring it to their mind. Everybody had a game tune. Even if we played Johnny Come Across or hide and go seek, everybody had some type of game tune. So to bring it to mind for them, such as Mary Mac, dressed in black, silver buttons up and down her back. The response, hi-yo, change the word. What are you trying to say now? They now say, I know, I know, I know, I know. Say, what do you know? They understand that Mary Mack was dressed in black. Maybe she was going to a funeral. Maybe Mary Mack was a little bit depressed, but now they have an awareness of what the message behind what they've been singing all along can come to mean. And now they have a way to give it back and fight for their rights. No matter what those rights may be, they have an avenue, something that everybody knows that has become this call and response. He can add a beat to it that's just simple, and it can be just that beat of walking. It can be just that beat of what happens in between those words. We go, I know. There's a silence in there. I know. That now becomes a rhythm and a beat, and they start to listen to themselves. So it's inclusive. It's not exclusive. It's inclusive, meaning in and inviting for their own truths. That we do bring to the classroom. Whatever classroom that we go in, we open that space up for all music, for all people to be able to say that. But we use something that's very tangible and relatable to them, starting off with just a simple game tune and then opening it up to what they can do.
Mary Mack is such a great example of the folk process at work. You know, in folk music, well, not just folk music, really in all music, composers are constantly stealing stuff from all of their best competitors. And there's huge amounts of musical material that are just floating out in the zeitgeist that we've all got in our consciousness. You know, mine eyes have seen the glory of the burning of the school. Well, that's a protest about fifth graders who are angry about teachers' rules. Everybody knows it, right? Everybody knows the melody. I was saying earlier that we've all found our own melodies and we're not connected anymore. But as I was sitting here, I was thinking, you know, the thing that does connect everybody, the melodies that we've all got going in our heads, are Christmas songs that they pipe into Walgreens or Target or wherever you're going for 6 weeks or 8 weeks every December. And I'll tell you, you want to change the world. Pick one of those melodies that everybody already knows, steal the melody, and with 15 words or less, make up a song about the issue that you care about.
That's true. We've got time for one more question.
I have lots of thoughts, but my main thought is the thing that you guys keep coming back to is that Facebook isn't a substitute for community. And our organization and our protest has always, in the past, come out of deeply spiritual, connected communities. So how do you feel like we can bring that back into the world that we're in right now? And maybe use some of these technological tools to foster connection rather than, you know, disconnection.
Well, before we even get to the Facebook, to the technological side, how can we bring that back to the communities we have in our neighborhoods? I mean, it starts with personal connection. If I believe and I treat someone a way that they would like to be treated, I've made a connection there. So with every person I touch, if they reach out and they touch another person, that's another layer. And then that continues to grow. And then that spreads. The same thing accounts for Facebook and social media. But we have to have it in that same sort of connection. There has to be a personal connection. It can't just be a number or a face or just a certain amount of likes or a certain amount of followers. We've become so caught up with numbers, but we already know that quantity does not equal quality. So if we put that same amount of time into really connecting with the friends we have, I mean, I could just accept you. Yep, you're one of my friends. What's your dog's name? I don't know. No, what's your favorite color? I don't know. But if I really get to know you and you really get to know me, now when I say, hey, here's what I believe, what do you think? And now we really get to have that discussion and we move it forward from there. The same, they tell two people, they touch two people, they touch two people. Now we've created a community both on and off social media. And that's what's absent. So that's really what we have to do.
I think people just need to talk to other people. that simple. You need to talk to people that like live in your neighborhood, they live next to you, live in your building. I know I talk about BYP 100 a lot, but that's what I used to organize with. We when we first got started, we would like go out into like communities that like we were from and just get people's emails and tell people, y'all, like we're meeting up this week, and we still have like weekly meetings. And it's just like it's a natural thing. Just go out there and like talk to people. It's really simple. It's like we think it's deeper than it's not, but just talk to people and then use social media to keep people connected on what's going on, because people check their social media for everything. You know what I mean? So that's what I think it is.
I go back to the power of live music too. I mean, if you can find places. I saw Patti Smith right before the end of the year at the Riviera, and it was really a great community experience, you know, and people really revved up, and she did. People have the power, and it was just so. I go back to finding live music and finding places where you can hear this music and people can gather together and get inspired by the music and also talk to other people. I wish there was more of that. Yeah.
Then I say realize the touch is not just this thing that happens with hand. The touch is getting, like you said, getting to really, really know the people, not just friend anyone. Really, really getting a chance to know the people, talking to the people, being with the people, aiding the people, really listening to what the people have to say, and then treating the people. This is the thing that we have all forgotten, and I say we have all forgotten. Treating the people the way we truly want to be treated. That's the best protest right there. If I don't want to be treated bad, then I'm not going to treat you badly. So treating the people the way they truly want to be treated, even on social media. There would be some things that you would not put there, and some people that you would not contact there or associate yourself with. So you have to, and that's having that leader, again, being strong enough within yourself to know that I need to really reach out and contact and touch and get to know this person before I accept them as a friend. And I really have to love and know and contact and be in touch with myself before I can be in touch and in contact with anyone else. That's the strongest tool that we have. That's the way we're going to touch anybody out here, is to really, if I connect with her, truly connect with her. If I see her right outside of here and I go up to her and I say, "Hi, how are you? My name is Cynthia Johnson Woodfolk, and your name is," and I truly, truly connect with her, see her again, talk to her again, not on Facebook, but see her again and talk to her again. When we finally do get to Facebook, I know her and she knows me, and we can truly have a conversation. Then we can truly move on to what it is that we need to do, because we have gotten a chance to know each other and to know if we are on the same length in order to do things. That's having the goal in mind and setting that there.
And protest music is just a tool for making that a reality. Mm-hmm. All of the best protest music, even the angry protest music, is motivated by a deep sense of compassion and caring for community. And it might be angry because it feels that the community's been lost or damaged, but that's the place where that protest music that connects with your heart is coming from. And you know, if you can't do it with love, why bother?
It's true.
Well, I thank you all for coming out. I thank the Lyric Opera and Chicago Voices for making this an opportunity. And we're free to go.